You're listening to A Seat at the Tech Table, a podcast by Sisters in Tech, hosted by Anna and Esther Kofarigi. This podcast highlights the experiences of Black women working and thriving in the tech industry. You'll learn about how they found their paths into tech, and hopefully you'll be inspired to consider whether there's a seat for you at the tech table.
Today's guest is Clorama Dorvilias, an LA-based product manager. Let's start the show. Hi, Clorama, and welcome to A Seat at the Tech Table.
Hi, thank you for having me, Esther and Anna.
Excited to be here. Speak with you. So, for everyone at home, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yes, so I am a product manager at Oculus. And I've been LA-based for about 5 days officially now. SF-based. I'm born and raised in San Jose, so I'm one of the rare Bay natives who work in tech in Silicon Valley right now.
Yeah. Excellent. So one of the things we want to show people is that no matter where you start, you can find kind of a way into tech. So we'd love you to tell us a bit about your background. What did you study at school? What were your interests? And kind of how did that kind of take you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I definitely have one of those like unconventional backgrounds that I think I never thought was a possible route to where I am today. I'm what you call a polymath. I think that's the word. It's either polymath or polyglot. I always forget. But it's basically one of those people that like you have a million passions, you love everything. And I naturally had like a very skill set that where I felt like I could learn anything and I wanted to do everything. So like I think my hardest struggle was figuring out having to pick one career path and one skill set to focus on to be successful in that career path. I always found myself like wanting to try millions of different things. Like in high school, I was in like in all the clubs. I was in ASL, like leadership. I was in, what do you call it? I wanted to say king, but like president of the Black Student Union. I was in sports. I played volleyball, basketball, like softball, track. I was in theater. I loved theater. I was a drama kid. I was always like trying different new things and always very curious about different types of things to do and hobbies. And I'd always leverage that to figure out, okay, well, what do I like the most? And I was in step. I was interested in cheerleading, but I couldn't afford it. And I think when I having that path, like I think I was very fortunate where I found myself in environments, or I always search for environments where I didn't have limitations put on me in terms of what I could try. Like, for example, my freshman year of high school, I was in this like it was a high school that was like in the top of its, I didn't say its league, but basically like district. It was like the number one high school in its district. As a result, like they were really good in sports and really good in all of these different things, which means you had to be exceptional to make it onto those teams. And you had to have money. And so as a result, and when you focus on one of those things, like if I wanted to join a sport, that would be it for the year. And so I remember feeling very limited and not knowing what to do and never being really good enough to excel in any one thing, but also just finding myself very limited. And I think after the next year, I like begged my parents to go to what was actually like the second worst high school in the district. But as a result, it was like everything was open. Like the sports stuck to all of that. But I could do all of those things, like, because there's rarely anyone auditioning for them anyways. And it's like, what? You're tall? Yeah, join the basketball team. What? Like, you want to be in theater? Sure. Join. So like, it made it really easy to like do all of those things and kind of get a sense of like what made my heart happy versus like what made my heart happy on a temporary level versus like, and it always gave me something to look forward and chase. And that carried on in college and that carried forward in my real life. And so my job trajectory looks the same as well. But yeah, so long story short, to answer your question, I worked in the public sector. I was looking for ways where I felt like justice was always a strong thing that I was really interested in, and sports. And so trying to figure out, okay, what's a career path that's viable for me as a woman? I loved sports, but I wasn't a man. So therefore, like where I could go and how high I can go is always going to be limited. And I love justice, but how I apply that justice was like the next question. So I tried legal, like interning at law firms, looking at policing and firefighter like type of work. And I'm like, oh, okay, no, I'm too rebellious for that. And then like I tried the nonprofit sector and I tried local government. So I worked in those different fields for like the first few years of my career. And then I inadvertently discovered tech that way as a solution for like, organizing people and what's like a good scalable way to help the masses discover resources that would empower them to make decisions that could, or have or access resources that can get them to where they actually to improve their quality of life.
Nice. So I want to dig in there because you say that you discovered tech inadvertently. So what was some of that early stuff? What were the kind of the first glimmers of tech as something that could be in your life?
Yeah. So I as a consumer, prior to seeing tech, I loved Facebook. I was like, I loved like, I was like in 2005, I was in college and that's when Facebook kind of came out. And I think it was my freshman year. So Facebook for me was really like exciting to connect with other people on my campus or to see what other people do, and also to connect with my friends when we're like not together in classes or when we were studying in the library, but we didn't want to talk out loud. We would just be like chatting each other, making fun on each other's like walls, like kind of sending jokes to each other. Like, and I felt like that always made studying a little bit more fun. And I think I remember like graduating college and so I used it in all of those, like all these different communities that I've been in. And that always helped me like strengthen my relationships or add more fun to my daily activities, especially during work when it's like, you get bored, like you're usually on Facebook. And that was like a big problem back then for productivity in the workplace. And so when I was at, I did this one job at Silicon Valley Leadership Group where I was an associate it was basically kind of like a lobbyist group. It was founded by David Packard from HP, one of the founders of HP, who wanted to give a voice to all the tech companies in Silicon Valley in local policy issues. And so we had like about 350 companies that we represented and in 9 different policy areas. And I specifically worked as an organizer within the housing and community development policy areas. So representing, I had to represent Apple when they wanted to build their like new building. They had to pitch like what that architecture would look like or how it would be positioned in Campbell, in the city of, was it Cupertino or Campbell? In the city of Cupertino. And then I would go to Cupertino and find out who the advocates were, find out the neighborhood organizations were, like who are the community leaders, and have a chat with them about what they would like to see, as these companies are building on their spaces in the neighborhoods, what are their concerns with that? And how do we get Apple to address those concerns in a way that's, so that way when they pitch to the city of what they're going to build, people will actually be in supportive of it versus like being against it. A good example of that is like they, instead of building gates around their whole campus, they put trees, which is a lot more community friendly and less, and so like that was like one of the compromises, that we can get. So it was getting community a voice. And I just remember being like, in that role, I had to go door to door for a lot of these neighborhoods, like, if we wanted to build affordable housing in Los Gatos, and Netflix was there, and how do we get them how do we get locals there to support this initiative, especially those who benefited from community from affordable housing, and give jobs to the junior level workers, to Starbucks workers, to teachers in the area. I would have to go to door and knock on people's doors and have a conversation with them and tell them what's going on, one by one, building up this community support and understanding what their concerns are. And I was like, it felt like it was when I was like, why don't we just use Facebook? Like, that's what I felt like. I was like, make a group and like people can learn about this stuff. People who are interested in this stuff and who are already engaged. Like, we have this online platform to connect with each other and know who the stakeholders are, and have these conversations with each other. And it's versus like the manual approach of me going because that means that people will only discover this issue unless I knock on their door. I was like, let's transfer this onto the internet. And so that's what I did. I worked with someone on my company to build a WordPress site. And I would put all the local initiatives that were happening for housing or proposals that were happening for different cities. And I did a campaign around it for all these different cities and all the neighborhood groups to learn about how to use this site and how to throw their information on there. Right. And as a result, what we saw within the first 6 months, the site went from 0 to 5,000 unique viewers in 6 months. And we started getting a lot of resources. Like people were discovering things, like coming to events and like events where we would talk about a certain initiative happening in a city that used to maybe only get 10 people. We're now getting 50, 60 people because people discovered about the event from Googling it and finding it online. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is doing my job for me. And and so I felt like tech was like the missing piece or the gap to really engage community members to knowing what was happening in their neighborhoods and seeing what the resources are, knowing who's who and who's influential to start to participate in the changes that were happening in the communities as a result of these big corporations coming in and expanding. So I was like, oh, this is it. And the more time I spent on it, the more I was getting pushback from my org, from my the nonprofit. And it was only the resistance I was getting was a resistance to a new way of doing things that I think threatened their jobs, or I don't know what it was, but they found, I think when I found that this was doing my job for me and it was helping me meet goals exponentially, they were telling me like I was getting more and more pushback from people like not to work on this. Like I got told at one point, I'm not allowed to work on the website until after work. Like I couldn't work on it during work hours. Yeah. And so I left the company after that and I was like, this is the answer. Tech is a way for, that could really uplift communities. It's the missing piece. And I think that there's an opportunity here to really leverage this technology to help advance communities and empower communities in a way that they're no longer left at the hands of third-party lobbyist groups like ourselves, who really are not working for the interests, but in working in the interests of the companies. And
that's so interesting. So interesting. I think like it's quite interesting for you like recognize how you saw tech filling the gap in your job. I guess my question is, at that point, was it clear that you wanted to work in the tech industry, or like how were you going to utilize tech?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't think I would work in the tech industry. I felt like I missed that boat at that point. This is 2011. I was like, oh, the only way to work in tech is to have a computer science degree. And I have a political science degree, and that's not going to get me there. And so I never thought that I could work in tech. I didn't see the avenues. I just knew that this was the answer to really having impact in a way that I didn't see any of the nonprofits that I worked at was able to deliver on. I think tech could have done that and done it tenfold, 10x the impact that was promised, and do it with more integrity because it would be community driven and not nonprofit driven. And nonprofits are mostly led by, and I'm going to be frank, white women who are the wives of rich millionaires or billionaires and they need something to do, and then they only hire other people who look like them to run these nonprofits to help poor people or low income people or people, and mostly serving people of color. But there was always an empathy gap, and there was always a service gap, and the way they decided who to help was always determined by where they got donations from, and not necessarily what the high value needs were for the community. And so when I was working in these institutions, and they would bring me like, oh yeah, you're Black, you can interface with the community well, and you'll understand, like I felt being used as a tool, but I couldn't deliver on the impact that I saw that was really needed and what the community was asking for, because I had to work as an agent for these institutions. And I just thought like, oh, tech can really reverse that. Social media can reverse that. So I didn't think that like I could work in this industry. I didn't see that path for me. What I saw was I wanted to figure out a way that I can, on my own, deliver this solution. And the path that I saw for that was to learn these skills. And I think in my point was graphic design that I saw as my entry point for this, to learn graphic design and to design like email newsletters and websites and all of that. And volunteer for nonprofits that were grassroots led, like grassroots organizations, not nonprofits, like community organizations that are forming neighborhood leadership groups, and volunteer to work with them to build their social media presence, to to then start to attract resources to be more discoverable. So that was my path. That was my thinking. And I was going to work a part-time job, like at a restaurant or something like that, to fund that work. And I wanted to start to do this internationally as well, because I always wanted to travel. And I eventually did. And so I did a little 6-month trip around Europe, like a backpacking trip. I was super broke for like $2,000. I think I had it. Like, I was like, let's see how long this lasts. And because I had this midlife crisis of realizing I needed to do this work versus the other piece. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. And so that trip kind of brought me to who I was. It kind of realized it silenced all the noise in my environment here in the States and what I could do and what I couldn't do and expectations that were placed on me. And when I did this backpacking trip, I was meeting all these people from around the world who are doing all these different things. And I was like, oh, I can do this. It built my confidence. I was like, I can live a life where I can be a nomad and offer services to different grassroots around different organizations and help them build their social media and build their website because they can't afford, website developer. So I moved to New York City, met some people in that field, learned the trade. And the first opportunity I got about a year and a half after living in New York was my friend's mom, who owned an NGO, also very grassroots, volunteer-led, that supported women who survived trafficking to become entrepreneurs. And they put them through business school at Imperial College. So that was my first opportunity. I was like, okay, I'm going to go volunteer for them.
I just wanted to pick up a couple of things because you went really fast over some kind of really key things, I think. So I just want to jump back because you spoke about kind of when you left that kind of lobbying organization and you kind of didn't feel like you could find a way into tech, but you felt like there were some answers with some of the tools and some of the systems that you had become accustomed to. And you said that you saw graphic design as an entry point. So you began to upskill yourself there. I want to just dig into whether you had some graphic design skills previously and whether you did or not, kind of that process of upskilling, because I think this is a really important thing for people listening, that sometimes the way forward is through learning. And it's not necessarily formal learning, but kind of learning online and things like that. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll say this. As a kid, I love drawing. Like I said, I love doing a lot of different things. So I always loved to draw. I used to love reading comic books, and I used to like to try and draw the comics, the superheroes, on like my free time. So I always had and the only classes I got A's in high school and in college were art and Spanish. So I always had that creative side of me, but I always knew that, or I was always told, that's not a lucrative career field. So I've always associated it as like a hobby that whenever I had time for, I'll do it if I was bored. But it was not something that I would ever see as a viable path. When I did this role as the lobbyist role, I had to create, a lot of my role was event organizing and getting people to come up and show up in my and show up in high numbers. The way that I saw a way to do that, this is like, again, Microsoft Paint days. And I found joy. And like when I had to create these email invitations, I would use all these emoticons and like I would just design the flyers or the invitations. Like I would spend so much time designing the flyers and the invitations to showcase these events. I felt like I could convey an energy about this event that really spoke to people to feel engaged, to want to come and drive excitement to come. So I love that part of my work. I just never knew that this could be its own career path. And it wasn't until I traveled and was meeting people who were like, hustlers or freelancers. I didn't know what freelance was until I moved to New York. But I moved to New York, I joined AmeriCorps again. It was my second year. I was working for an animal shelter. And I remember seeing at the printer, there was a resume somebody had submitted to the animal shelter for a graphic design position that the shelter was hiring for. And I was like, what is this? And I looked at it. It was graphic design. And it was like design flyers, ads, banners, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, this is a role? I was like, this is like a job. And then so I remember I was like, I saved it. I stole it. I should have said that. Copy and taking it home and being like, what the heck? And Googling it and learning that a graphic design position existed. And I used to hookah a lot. So I went to a hookah shop and I remember, and I would go by myself and so I remember in New York was very friendly in this case. If you're by yourself, like people would talk to you. And it was like kind of synchronicity. Like I met someone who said, I was like, oh, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm a graphic designer. I was like, oh my gosh, you're a graphic designer? I was like, I just learned about this. Like I saw that the thing. I was like, what does your job do? I was like, you just design things all the time? Like he's like, yeah, pretty much. And I was like, life blown. Yeah, and then like I think a few weeks later, the shelter hired someone, and I remember going up to her and I was like, "Can I?" I was like, "Can I ask you about what you do?" And I was like, "Can I just shadow you just to see what your day looks like?" And she was like, "Yeah, you can shadow me on Fridays. I do a lot of my design work on then." I was like, "Okay, cool." So I remember going to her cubicle on a Friday and sitting behind her, and watching her use Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, tools I'd never heard of before. And I remember feeling spiritually, like there was a spiritual, I don't know, I never felt it before, but it felt like, if I were to describe it, I felt spiritual, like God, like I felt like God in that moment. And just watching her. And I was like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do. Wow. And I asked her to mentor me, and she mentored me. And, you know, I didn't have any of the tools. I didn't have the laptops or anything like that. But I remember I couldn't afford a computer because I was making $900 a month with that job, and my rent was $650 for a shared room in New York, in Brooklyn. And so I would like start small. I went to the library. I rented I would borrow books, the Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator for Dummies, and I would just read that on my spare time until I got a tax refund that enabled me to buy a laptop, and then I ended up moving into a share. How do you call it? It's like a co-living space in Brooklyn. And two of the people who lived there, I think it was like 13 other people who lived there from different parts of the countries. Two of them that were there were from Amsterdam. They were art students at SVA, I think, in New York. And so they were graphic designers by trade, they're students. And so they hooked me up with like a crack version of Adobe Photoshop on my Creative Suite. And I got to learn a lot from them, living with them about how to design and what best practices to use. And so that was my entry point.
So interesting. I think that it just reminds me of like my entry point, to be honest. I guess I come from a very similar kind of graphic design background. And I just never ever thought I could work in tech, because I guess in my mind, I'm always thinking it's very technical. You just don't connect the dots until I started seeing UX designer. And I was just like, what the heck is this? How is this different? So similarly, I saw like a job description for a UX designer. I was just looking at it thinking, this looks so similar to like a job description for a graphic designer. But I was so far removed from like the tech industry, it just didn't make any sense to me. So yeah, it's just quite interesting to see how people come together like from diverse backgrounds into tech.
Yeah, it's funny because I met two people recently. One of them is a production, I don't know how you call it, a production person. Like she makes films and videos and all of that stuff. And she was like, yeah, that was her dream calling, like when she was young. But like, obviously in her mind, the path of doing that is going to Hollywood. And she's from the South, I think like Alabama or something. And so she never thought that she could actually do this for tech. Like she works at Oculus now, and she's the head of the production for a lot of our videos and stuff. And she's Black too, which is cool. I remember we were talking because we were doing a video together for Oculus, and she was like, yeah, you know, it's funny because I always thought Hollywood was the path for this, and I didn't want to do the Hollywood lifestyle because I always hear that the industry is very toxic. But it wasn't until she joined a startup I forgot what her role was. It was something very like, it wasn't technical, it was a non-technical role, but they needed to do videos, and she was like, oh, I can do the videos for you. And then so they were like, okay, cool. Because, startups, you can be scrappy. They don't have the money to hire everyone. But if you can do multiple things, it's an amazing place if you're someone who has many passions being at a startup, because there's so many things that you need to do. And you're expected to fill in the gaps on limited resources. And so, yeah, she started doing video work for them. And that experience led her to a bigger startup to do video work for them. And that experience led her to come to Oculus, and where she's like secure. She doesn't have to be a hustling artist. And she was like, I had no idea that like tech would need video. And it says, I know the same thing I met someone who was graduating from my alma mater as a communications person at communications. And she was like, yeah, I don't know, there's no jobs that's going to give me that. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like I have to work with communications directors at Oculus all the time. And for every product we put out, they're the ones that, write how we're going to share this with the world and how we're going to communicate this out to the world. But it's interesting how we don't draw these links to where communications take you. She was thinking like, oh, I wasted my degree on a non-lucrative. And I was like, I was actually surprised that that's still, the narrative today. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I was that's a straight shot into a tech company where you can make six figures immediately and get to, communicate about new technologies to the world. And a lot of, I don't know, I just feel like tech companies, if anything you want to do, if you want to be an artist, if you want to be like those struggling jobs that the narrative used to be like, there's no lucrative path. Tech is now that is that path, like period. They need everybody. And it's a whole ecosystem of career, legal. If you want to be a lawyer, corporations need lawyers, and they have to give a say on every single product that we do. We have to go through them. Like anything, like I feel like any role you want to take, like tech has a place for you, and they will pay you six figures if the higher you go. It's an easy introduction. Yeah.
Cool. So, was it New York where you discovered tech?
Yeah, so I guess indirectly, yes, because the reason I even discovered, so I am a developer by trade. And what ended up happening was, what it was is graphic design was my stepping stone. So I hate graphic design now. Graphic design, I hate it. I hate, like, you have to be super detail oriented and like all of that stuff. And I just remember like, and what took me to that point was the mentor that I had, she was like, if you want to be a freelancer, which I also learned that terminology while I was in New York, she was like, you have to be competitive in the graphic design field, you know how to code. And she was like, know how to do a little bit of HTML and CSS, especially since websites are now a thing and people need design for websites more so than flyers, because at this point, flyers and banners by paper was like a thing. And like tech websites were just starting to take over. And she was like, so that will help you get to give you a competitive edge over other graphic design freelancers, which were plenty in New York City and non-existent in the Bay Area at that point. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I took like an online course, Skillshare.com, and it was like, learn to build your portfolio or online portfolio or website from scratch using HTML and CSS. I was like, perfect. I can create an online portfolio because I don't have the money to buy a website and do all that stuff. And at the same time, learn how to do HTML and CSS. So it was like a win-win. The course was like $13. When I tell you, I became obsessed. It was, learning to code, learning HTML, learning how to style it, and being able to see the sum of that on a website, like being able to create with design in a way that felt like magic. It consumed me to unhealthy levels. I would wake up for the first time ever. I was somebody who like didn't wake up until like 12 o'clock, 1 p.m. if you let me. When I started getting into the thick of web development, I hated to go to sleep. I hated like sleeping. I was like, dang it. I was like, this is less time that I could spend figuring this out, learning this thing, solving this problem, and learning like a new, learning how to style something or like design something, like just less time to code. So I would go to sleep like at 12 and I would wake up at 6 excited to like, okay, thank God, I feel good. I was like, let me go and like take on the next part of this course and like try to figure something out. And how do I put this picture here? How do I style it here? And like, and all of that. And so like, it got to a point where my roommates were really worried about me because they were working at that time. I had just gotten, I think, laid off from, not laid off, I had gotten wrongfully fired at my restaurant job, but that was, God pushing me out. Ray was pushing me out of something that I was comfortable in. And as a way, like when I got wrongfully fired, I was able to get unemployment. And so that employment sustained me. I had that security of knowing I could still pay my rent, but I needed things to do. And it was New York winter. So there was no distraction from going outside and doing all these events because it was snowing and it was freezing. So I was home all the time. I was like, I need something to do. I was like, okay, finally, like, let me just try this course. And so I would wake up at 7 o'clock, at 6:30, as soon as I could. I would go straight to the course. I would go to the living room in my pajamas with a blanket over me, and I would see my roommates leave to work at 7:30, 8 or 9, and then they would come back late from work like 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. and they would see me in the exact same spot. The laptop open and just like, and like, and I think that it got to a point where they were like, they were looking at me like they were worried. And I felt this, I started to feel like, I was like, I don't know. I don't care like what I was, giving off, but anyways, so that's when I knew like, I I think graphic design was the thing that was going to take me there. And I don't think there was anything else that was going to show me that I could do web development or even show me how I can do web development if it wasn't for the path of graphic design and website design and that mentor telling me, hey, to be competitive, explore this. And it was just like a culmination of elements that kind of led me to it. So I got obsessed with web development, and that's what I started doing from then on. And it made me even better in service to the NGOs and organizations that I was working at, where I could build the website for them and not just design it.
Amazing stuff. So, and I obviously I know a bit of your journey, so I'd love you to kind of tell us kind of that intervening part between discovering your love for software development or web development and kind of almost up to now.
Oh, yeah. So doing that work, again, it's all like the stepping stones to where I'm at now. But like I found the NGO, they needed a website to be built. And I was like, yes, this like capitalizes on a broader range of my skill sets. I get to be more of who I am. I don't have to just stick to just design. I can also build the thing in code. And so I was able to leverage multiple skill sets that I had. And so that stimulated me. And then for the benefit of a nonprofit or an NGO. So when after I finished that course and I built my online portfolio for my graphic design work, and also because I was painting too, like during that time to like kill time. So I put my paintings up on my website. I put online. I remember feeling really depressed. It was a very low point. It was January of 2014 where everything just fell apart. I got wrongfully fired from my job. The guy I was talking to, like, I found out he was engaged and whatever. And my roommates, who were my really closest friends at that time, we got into a disagreement about something. I felt very betrayed about something. So I was giving them like the silent treatment, and they did not like that. And so they wanted to evict me. So they did evict me. They gave me a 60 days notice to move out. And then, and this all happened within 3 weeks. And then plus I was obsessed with the 49ers at that point. So the 49ers had lost the NFC championship. So we didn't make it to the Super Bowl, to the worst team ever, which is Seattle Seahawks. So 2014 started off with a bang. And I remember being at the end of the month, I was like, what the hell just happened? And I had no idea. I was like, everything is just shattering and I have no idea what was happening. And so I just started I took those online courses to fill up my time. I was trying to apply for more restaurant jobs, but I kept getting, no one was hiring me at any restaurant job or whatever. And my friend randomly called me from Japan. She was somebody that had worked at the restaurant job the year before. And we had only worked one shift together, but we bonded off that one shift. And she had moved when we were in New York, and she had moved to Japan for acting. She was an actor. And she was like, yeah, she was like, Clorama, I was telling her, I was like, I don't know what's happened. I don't know what my life is like, where it's going. And she was like, Clorama, she's like, why don't you use this opportunity to do everything that you wanted to do? Like when we first met, you told me you wanted to move to London because you really liked it. Why don't you just save up money and use this opportunity to move to London? And she was like, my mom has an NGO there. They need help with their website, I'm sure. And she's like, and you can apply your new skills there. And I was like, and she was like, we can rent a room to you for like super cheap. She was like, her own bedroom. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds absolutely perfect. So I took her up on that offer, got myself to London, was renting a room for, I think, £125 a week in Chelsea, living with her parents. And I was doing this full time, morning till night. I was working for the NGO. I built up their website, built up their social media channels, and did this over the next few months. We were able to attract the NGO had lost funding coincidentally in May, I think. So I moved there in March, and in May they had lost their biggest source of funding that kept the program going. Simultaneously at that time, Salesforce had discovered our NGO because they had Googled it and they saw our website and they were really interested. So they reached out through the website and said, hey, we want to support you. Like, let us know, blah, blah, blah. So it was like some woman at Salesforce. And so we met up with them and they're like, what can we do to help you? Like, what resources can we give you? And once that bridge got formed, the nonprofit was saved. We were able to get enough to keep us going. And I just remember seeing that power of that and be like, this is it. So what I did to fund myself there, my cousin who lived in LA, her boyfriend was best friends with Issa Rae's brother. And again, this is 2014, so Issa Rae didn't have HBO yet. She was like, Issa Rae had posted on her Facebook page, hey, I'm looking for a web developer who's fluent in HTML and CSS for a new project that I'm doing. I prefer a Black person. She's like, let me know if you have any contacts. And so my cousin shared that with me. And I think I was down to my last $50 that I had in my account that weekend. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I was like, oh shit. I was like, I'm going to have to move back to New York. And I was like, that was like the worst nightmare for me because I was loving it in London so far. And I think I stalked her on Twitter. I was like, hey, Sheree, I want this job, blah, blah, blah. I stalked her on Facebook. I stalked her on like her website. I sent like all these pings. And I was like, I'm your woman. I can do it for you. Da, da, da. And she emailed me and she's like, okay, girl, you got the job. Chill. She was like, this is what we're going to do. So they set me up and I started working with them. And I think I was making $100 a week. And that translated to 50 pounds in London, but that was more than enough for me to, I think groceries were 15 pounds and that was enough for me to get a few beers a week. And at that time, because I was doing so well for the NGO, they let me start to live there for free. So I didn't have to pay rent. And so what ended up happening after that was I wanted to stay in London. And so I applied to grad school and I was looking for visual design, communication courses and all of that. The only course at that time, this was in July, that was still accepting applications was the interaction design course, a master's in interaction at UAL. And I visited it. I remember thinking like, okay, when I saw it was like a show and tell, like you can go in and see what they're, and visit and see what it's like before you apply. And I remember they were showing like some weird projects, like a plant that can move, like that was made out of cotton or whatever. And it can move to your touch. And I remember like, this is really weird. And I was like, look, I'm just here to make websites better. I want to be standard because I'm pretty street smart. I learned this like through all the projects that I've done for people. Because when I finished my website, I posted on my Facebook, hey, if anybody wants a website, I can do it for them for super cheap, particularly for a woman. If you're a woman of color, or like minority entrepreneur, like I want to support you and I'll do it for like $200 and this money will fund my stay in London. So I done that. And I think I got like 8 different projects out of that like helped build me up. And I was like, okay, now that I know I've been doing this like on my own, I want to make sure like, am I doing it to what the industry standard is looking like? So when I went to that course and I remember seeing all these different random projects, I was like, I don't think this is for me. And I was like, do you guys showcase like how to make websites better? Like, that's what I'm really interested in. And he was like, yeah, we do that. And the guy basically lied to me. And he was like, yeah, that's what we do. We help you to make websites better. I was like, okay, cool. Let me tell you right now, we did not touch website development. Of course. At all. And that same guy that lied to me and I remember being like literally surprised, but that course exposed me to physical computing. Yep. I didn't know what UX was, but it was interaction design. I didn't know interaction design was UX. I didn't know what UX was until I graduated the course, ironically. But like, so this was 2015 at this point. It exposed me to like prototyping and how to prototype and how to do research-driven, projects to solving problems and how do we leverage technology and to innovate on different types of solutions that are not out there yet. And so I was so stimulated and had all these different modules, like how to communicate this new idea, like through filming. And so we did a film module on how to communicate speculative design and speculative technology, which is basically like Black Mirror, but in a nice way, like a positive outlook way. And we did like, paper prototyping and learn all these ways of prototyping and learning all these ways of like Arduino and IoT and developing solutions within that. And so I just remember being like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest course ever. And that same teacher, however, I learned within the first month, even though I got accepted in the course and I showed my web design portfolio, I had been doing web development as a freelancer for a year at that point, not let alone for Issa Rae for 6 months before I was like, I quit. Issa Rae had gotten picked up for HBO. So I stopped working with her on a daily basis. And then the person that took over was like, not that easy to work with. And then, and then like the grad school started, so I didn't want to be distracted anyways. And so I had a lot of confidence in my skill set as a developer. This assistant professor did not. And he made that very clear within the first week when we were talking about projects. And I was like, I pitched him my idea. I was the last person he came to. And he was like, I have 15 minutes. He spent an hour with every single person and the students to like help them figure out their ideas. And he was like, hey, I have 15 minutes. I'm going to miss my train. So let's get this done really quick. I was like, okay, what am I going to do with 15 minutes to like brainstorm? So anyways, I just told him, I was like, this is my idea. And he's like, oh, that's going to be too complicated. And I was like, it's okay. I'm not afraid of it complicated. I was like, I'm American. That's what we do. And I was like, that was being jokey or whatever, but I did say that. And he was like, well, I'm afraid of it complicated for you. And I was like, wow, what does that mean? And I remember being like, kind of like, I was like on this very high self-confident train. So I didn't even know how to register that. I just remember being like, I didn't know what that meant. And so I was like, okay. And I was like, I still want to do this, and blah, 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 blah. And he was like, well, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. I was like, it's okay. I can figure this out. And he's like, well, if you do it, you're kind of on your own. And I was like, okay, fine. And so he left, and I spent the next 3 weeks doing it on my own. And he was helping every single other student. He was helping them figure out things, blah, blah, blah. Whenever I asked for help, I was like, hey, I'm stuck on this technical thing. And he would just kind of be like, well, I can't help you. So I had to go to Google. So it taught me to like be self-taught, in whatever I did. And I ended up being the only person in that project to be able to demonstrate my project and have it technically work without faking it for my presentation. And I just remember over time, I started realizing, I was like, oh, he's treating me differently from my peers. And the next project came along and we had to write code for something. And he was like, he told me a day before we had to submit our projects. He was like, I want you to comment out every single line of your code because I want to make sure you understand what code you're writing. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's weird. I was like, why would you tell us this 24 hours in advance? I could have been doing this. I have a lot of lines of code. And I was like, I'm still trying to, get my project to work. And I started talking, you're working with your classmates. And I was like, did you guys have to do this too? And I was like, isn't that suck that we have to do this? And they're like, what are you talking about? We didn't get asked to do that. And I was like, so anyways, I learned about bias real quick. Once I learned about bias, I was like, my master's thesis project, which was, I was like, I'm going to use that to solve this problem. And that's how I just discovered VR. And I learned online how to develop through VR. Again, somebody tried to dissuade me for an hour. It's going to be too hard. You're not going to be able to do this. I was like, it's okay. I just want to see how far I go, and I'll document it. And for the next student who wants to try it with VR, like they'll know where I failed and all that, and they can be a step further. I ended up getting it to work within a day and a half, and the rest is history as my VR career.
Wow, amazing.
Sorry, I'm just picking up on what you said about that guy, because I think we've had all three of us have had conversations before, and sometimes the hardest thing about anything, work, studies, is the people. It's not the subject matter. It's always the people. And this is just kind of, I guess, a lesson for the listeners that sometimes what can be a challenge, sometimes an impairment in your own career is other people's insecurities. Wow. Because as soon as you said that he asked you to comment out the code, I think he did that because he was worried he wouldn't understand it. So he wanted your help.
Wow, I didn't even think that.
That is on point. Yeah, definitely that. Definitely that. Because most of the people, like even with the VR project, when I started to do that work, the technical assistants, we had 2 technical assistants who was dissuading me from doing it. He had a master's degree in mechanical engineering and a PhD in game design or gameplay development or something. And so he had gotten the developer kit, and he kept telling me we couldn't get it to work. Me and the other technician, everybody in the department, we could not get it to work. You're not going to be able to get it to work. Like, da, 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 da. And I was like, it's okay. I just want to try. I just need to get it in my hands because I had VR already in my mind for a while now. And I found a blog in 2014. I was like, I just feel like it's kind of like, I just need to try it. I just want to try it. And he was like, you're not going to work. You only have 4 minutes to deliver this project. It's not going to blah, blah, blah. If you do it, we can't help you. And I was like, that's okay. That's fine. And so I went, watched a YouTube video, and like, I think I was able to get it done. Literally, I was able to get the demo up and running within a day. And then like by the day and a half, the second day, I was able to create my own experience in VR that I was able to visit in. And when I showed them this, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I figured it out and they didn't. And I did not have their mechanical engineering background, blah, blah, blah. So I think there's a lot of ego that comes with this as well, especially from the male population when they're taught to believe that they're the experts. That's why they're in the class. And here I am, like a bubbly, like, very feminine person who's like, I'll figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing. But then like, I figured it out. And I think there's something that has to be ego deflating about it. And where I got to it, over the course of the 4 months that I was building this project, if I said, oh my gosh, I'm stuck, or there were some points where I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. When I would say that, they couldn't hide smiling. It's like they felt justified, and they needed to feel like they were right. And they needed to feel like, I think a part of them actually, as a result, needed to see me fail so they could feel better about them not having been able to fail. And you're right, it couldn't have been a personal thing, but I took it personal. I was like, you guys are hating on me because I'm a woman of color, but I'm a Black woman and I'm doing this. Like, that's how I interpreted it. But yeah, definitely now in hindsight, I realized it was more so a projection of insecurity and having to see me do it meant that they would have to believe that they were capable of doing it, versus like there's something wrong with the technology itself or something like that.
And I think it's really interesting kind of those kind of two outside forces at different stages of your career. So when you spoke about that graphic designer who was very kind of accommodating, let you shadow her, mentored you, that's kind of one person. And then you had these guys who were kind of a bit more difficult, let's say. But I think the important thing to flag is that they were both the right approaches for the different points in your career. So the graphic designer, she helped you kind of have that entry point. But those guys essentially through the back door taught you to kind of fend for yourself, to go to Google, to find answers by yourself. So I think that should just be an encouragement to anyone listening that it's not port that will always take you forward. Sometimes it is the resistance that will help you move forward.
Amen. Like, Tay, that's an amazing insight. I love it. And it's so, I never realized that, but you're right. Like at the end of the day, they were both tools that pushed me in the right direction. And I think if I had the resistance early on when I was in the graphic design, I think I would have been vulnerable to believing it. Once I built my confidence in all these areas, I think if they had believed in me, I probably wouldn't have been so determined to prove them wrong, to go through all the hurdles that is VR development, especially in 2015, to make it work. So you're right. I think at the right time, resistance and or cheerleading plays a role in. Oh my gosh, that was so deep.
Yeah, all those long hours that you spent on the couch when your housemates came back paid off. So it built up.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And that was driven by like internal, like that it stimulated me internally. Like I was really excited to figure out, but I also didn't have the awareness that women don't code. I didn't have that sense of bias. I didn't work in the industry. I only worked in a nonprofit where that was never a thing. So I didn't understand gender bias or racial bias in this field until that first time going into grad school, which is one form of institution in this industry, where I started to experience that. And by that time, my confidence muscle was already built in my capabilities. So it was easy for me to be, to rise to the challenge and see it as a challenge and be excited by like, if I can do all of that stuff in the past, I bet you I could do this too. Like, and again, I think all those pieces definitely were elemental to
okay. So you have like an amazing job right now. Tell us about your current role. What do you do?
Yeah, so I joined Facebook in 2019. I had spent the last few years as a freelance VR developer. I had moved back to the States in 2016, and I was doing it. And I had different institutions, like research institutions, asking me to do VR experiences for them. So I would do that I would moonlight doing that. My day job was a UXer. I worked in various UX roles, UX designer, UX researcher. I was a UX consultant at a startup in London before I came back to the States. So I did a lot of different UX roles by day. That was the job that would pay me, and that was the job that was in demand. And then by night, I would do these VR experiences for different random people who found me on the internet, because I would blog my experience and get money that way. I joined Oculus Launchpad in 2017. It was a program that Oculus put together for underrepresented developers to, create an experience, create an app for the VR system. And if they liked it, they would fund it. So it was a competition. 100 VR developers were accepted every year. I was part of the second cohort. My project got picked up. I partnered with another UX researcher who wanted to do bias training for teachers in the classroom. And my graduate program, my project, the one that I did to take revenge on my assistant professor, was how to use VR for bias training in the workplace and imagining what that could look like. And at that point, they were like, "You're crazy. No one at companies is going to use VR for training. Like this is a game device. This is like an Xbox, a PlayStation. Like it's an absurd proposal." And I was like, "But I think it makes sense to me. This is such a great training mechanism." So. I won funding. I started a company around it in 2018. I had I was getting so many calls from different Fortune 500 companies asking to make VR experiences for training, for their workplace. I had a team of 6 women of color, which was exciting. And we worked with ARM, we worked with HP, we worked with a few other enterprises as well, and it was a lot of success, but we did not have the money to scale to meet that success, to meet that traction. And I tried doing the investment round, and it was just really hard. There's a lot of layers against, VR being a cold market, also a woman of color asking for money. There's just a lot going against us. And so I burned out pretty fast. And at that same time, my friend called me. And she was like, "Hey, Clorama," she was also part of Oculus Launchpad, the first cohort. And she was like, "I think you should apply for the Facebook RPM program. It's a product manager role where you get to rotate on different teams at Facebook." And she's like, "I think you would be a good fit for it." And she had actually told me about this while I was in 2017. And I had actually interviewed she helped me teach me how to interview. And I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, it feels like I was supposed to be there." When I was learning, the more I learned about Facebook's mission, the more I learned about how they interviewed, it was really making sure that, they didn't ask you questions like, "How do you feel about this?" and blah, blah. I mean, they did a little bit, but it was mostly show us your thought process and how empathetic you are and how you're able to apply that to making user-centered facing projects for our mission. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, this is in integrity with what I wanted to do. My personal life mission was how do I help build tools to empower communities to discover and access and connect to each other, to leverage each other's resources to improve their quality of life. And Facebook, I think that same year, changed their mission to helping communities be empowered to connect with each other and develop or something like that. I forget the actual, but it was something very similar. And so the more I learned about Facebook and Oculus, especially because I was working with Oculus and being part of the Facebook ecosystem and how they were using Oculus to drive that, to deliver on that mission and bringing people closer together and meaningful connections despite distance or physical distance, which at that time I was so international and nomadic. I was like, this is so me. And so I had worked at that time. I was working at another nonprofit, Code for America. And so they're sending me to Alaska to build website apps for their ecosystem. And when we were building an app for their public sector, we would meet with, Alaska has a neighborhood where it's the most diverse neighborhood in the country. It's called Mountain View in Anchorage. And it's 2,500 families. They speak 290 languages. And we had to find a solution to help them access job services or workforce services through politics. And these are people who are refugees, who didn't speak English, who are has the largest native indigenous community, who also didn't understand Western culture or thinking time and clocks and dates and, and didn't understand blocks. And we were talking to people who were just released from prison. There was a high prisoner reentry population who's been in prison for 20 years, so they didn't know how to use Google Maps or smartphones and all this technology and helping them navigate workforce services. You're talking about single mothers and anyways, a lot of this. And so I was like, how do we find a common denominator between all these diverse groups? And then through 3 months of working and interviewing and going through all these different places, I think we talked 25 different organizations and all their people. The number one factor was that they all use Facebook, a Facebook product, whether it was WhatsApp. Homeless people were going into the library to use Facebook. People would find about other jobs or find each other or find social capital through Facebook. They would, if they're coming back from reentering life or whatever from prison, like Facebook was their first place to find their cousins or find their family members or find friends that they could connect with and hear about jobs or opportunities or borrow their car for a job interview or pick up a ride for that. And so WhatsApp was how families, immigrant families, refugees were able to connect or connect to each other over like to their families in Russia or in Africa or in Asia and stay connected to them in a meaningful way that was free, and like a lot of these and this like. And Facebook was driving people to the library where they could access a lot of these resources because they didn't have computers at home or even Wi-Fi, a lot of them, or smartphones, that they would go to the library to use Facebook and therefore all of a sudden be connected to all these different services that the library offered, like free computer classes, job opening stuff. So I just remember being like, wow, Facebook is like the best nonprofit in the world. Like, they're doing all the work that every single nonprofit that I worked at was not willing to do. They don't meet the people where they're at. And Facebook was doing it. And people were being able to leverage and find these opportunities or discover opportunities and resources. You know, social capital is how you do it. And Facebook provided these really underserved communities this new avenue to, you know, leveling up their life if they wanted it. And, you know, and I was like, dang. And so I was really, at that point, and I was constantly getting disappointed at every nonprofit I worked with. So mashed that up together. My friend calls me, tells me I should apply for this role. I was like, again, I didn't know what a product manager was until that job because we had a product manager and they fired him 3 months later. I felt so bad. And it was because I was accidentally doing his job for him. I didn't realize like the strategy piece and figuring out what goes next. I was already driving that work. And so I was always ahead of him. And so as a result, they felt like it was pretty redundant to have him since I was already doing that work. And I didn't mean to do it, but I just felt like, okay, now that we figured out this piece, what do we do next? Okay, we need to figure out this. And this is how we communicate it to the stakeholders. And so it became, you know, and so I didn't realize I was doing this job. So that introduced me to the role of PM. At that same time, my friend calls me and says, I should apply for the PM role at Facebook. So it was, again, a lot of different things. And so I applied. I didn't get the job, but I did make it 5 rounds. I made it to the on-site interview. I had applied to like 200 other jobs at that point, and I was not getting calls back. I was not getting interviews. And the jobs I worked, I was getting interviewed. I wasn't making it past the recruiter. I was told I was not a good fit for a VR UX designer role that was doing for a company that was doing bias trading in VR. Like I was told like, and I had like, I met all those different, it was like, I was experienced bias in the industry as someone trying to apply for a technical role as a woman of color, especially in VR. And so when I applied again at Facebook, and I applied at Google, all this, like I was getting ignored and all that stuff. But Facebook again, not only interviewed me, I was making it all 5 rounds. So I applied again the next year when I was like feeling drained from the startup. And this time made all 5 rounds. I was less inclined to take the job. I was not that excited about it, but because not that I was not that excited about it, but I was not like as hung up on it as when I first applied. Just because I had the startup, I was like, well, no matter what, we'll be okay. So I didn't think I did as good as in the interview process as I did the year before. And yeah, I got hired. I just remember being just like completely shocked that I got hired at Facebook for the rotating product manager program. And at that time it happened so well that like only a month later, I started feeling really burned out from the startup stuff. And I felt like this was a good opportunity for me to enter the industry and learn what does a product manager do. And I was like, oh, they described it as a CEO of a product within the org. And I was like, oh, cool. I just learned what that was doing it with my own startup the previous year. And then joined Facebook, got the RPM program. My first team was the applied machine learning team because I was like really interested in that technology. And I was like, oh, this is my way to learn about it. And it was such a culture shock being a PM at a corporation because like going from being a startup founder and a CEO, like when you go to being a PM at a corporation, I thought it was going to be 10x harder, but it actually was like a little bit more of a relief. Like I didn't have to worry about the business side. I didn't have to worry about selling as much. I didn't have to worry about like, there's all these people that did all that work for you. You just make sure the product was going in the right direction and that people knew what they needed to build and how to build it and that you were proposing the right things and making sure you're measuring success right. And this is the part that I loved about my company, but I wasn't able to do anymore because I had to focus on getting investment, getting customers and all of that. I had to lose sight of the product. So And so now I joined the Oculus for Business team, which was also timely. That was my second rotation, and that was an experience. And and then I joined the Oculus Social Discovery team. I got to ship some features for the Quest, which is really cool. Some social features for the Quest. And now I'm on the VR dev team, and I support developers. I build tools for developers who are creating for a VR ecosystem that are launching games onto our store. And I had done that in 2018. So I understood and have empathy with that process and how tough it is and how complicated it is. And so I get to be part of the solution to simplifying that workflow and in my hopes of democratizing the developer ecosystem so we can see more cool content because we've made it development flow a lot more accessible. And so we get to see a lot more immersive experiential content that is exciting and really pushes the boundaries of what of the technology, but also just experiences in general that we probably don't have access to in our day-to-day life, and making that very accessible by this headset versus having to travel somewhere or having to luckily meet the right people and all of that. And also change the way we learn, and because I feel like it's such a great learning tool as well. We get to learn by experience versus being lectured to. And then just I don't know, you can paint and you can collaborate on there. You can paint with fire. You don't have to be limited to real lead paint or paint that smells. You can be in a tilt brush and you can paint with sprinkles and you can paint and it's 3D and you can stretch it and scale it. And I don't know, it's just there is no physical rules in VR and you are the creator and you can do whatever you want and build whatever you want. And and I think the more developers that unlock all these new use cases, the more exciting this technology will be for the world. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Okay, so VR is a relatively young and emerging field, and I'd love for you to kind of give our listeners some insights into kind of what kind of opportunities there are in the VR. So obviously you're a VR PM, and your work supports and empowers VR developers. But what really is the kind of potential for VR, and how should maybe people who are coming from different fields and different careers think about entering the VR space?
VR is alternate reality. It's a new reality. It's a new, and every app is a new planet that you can create. And whatever rules, whatever cultural thing, you're literally playing God in a human way with technology. You get to create. Rather than if I wanted to create an experience for people at a restaurant, I'd have to have a physical room. I'd have to have millions of dollars. I'd have to, create this feel and this vibe. I can now just use technology and a game and create and just I don't know how to say it. You can do that within minutes. You can do that within an hour or so where you can create a vibe where people can have an experience. Because we're building new worlds and new universes, every single job that you can imagine that exists and jobs that don't exist today are going to be necessary to really making VR as a technology flourish, and AR and MR as well. I don't know how to whatever your background is, there's a place for you in VR and to do it with magic. So if you're a painter, and I mean, some people like physical tactile stuff. So that is you can do hardware and all of that. But I feel if you like physical tactile stuff, I think there's always going to be a place for that in the real world. The real world is going to be people who just want to do things here. Then there's the digital world, and there's endless possibilities, and you can come from endless backgrounds. And as long as I feel the requirements now to get into VR, it's try it, check it out. But even most people who haven't tried it can still do things for it. And once you kind of experience it and experience a diverse range of experiences within VR, whatever you get bit by, whatever you get excited by is the thing that you can start to explore as a craft and to contribute to the ecosystem, whether it's as a creator, whether it's as joining a team and helping them publish or get more people to access their experience and communicating that, whether it's creating videos that are dynamic that can somehow I think so the biggest problem with VR is it's until you experience it, you don't really get it. And so, I mean, I think there is no background that can't get in or get in the door and start building skills, especially now when it's really early and no one has, 20 years of experience. I mean, some people do. They've been doing VR since like the 80s, but yeah.
Amazing stuff. I think, even if I speak for myself, you are the person who got me excited about VR. I've kind of known it from the periphery, but kind of your introduction made me think of wow, there's so much that we can do with this technology. So
this is a good question for you then. Like, what did it for you? Or like, what do you feel like? I feel like you have more of a better perspective since I've been doing this for about 5 years. I probably a little bit have lost empathy with what it was like going into it for the first time. Like, what is it for you that you feel like this industry can be exciting for anybody? Or, yeah.
I think from an industry perspective, there's, like you say, you're building new worlds. So from the ground up, anything that you might want to do. This is really random, but I had ideas about kind of VR puzzles. Now, you have puzzles in real life, you have online puzzles, but can you imagine you have a puzzle of Buckingham Palace where you have the pieces and you're putting VR is just mind-blowing. What do you think about it?
You legitimately build a puzzle of Buckingham Capital at scale,
exactly.
and in 3D. Oh, snap! That's a legit idea. You should have done
it yesterday, honestly.
Trademark that. Yeah.
I think from the perspective as well, that's how you kind of got me into it. I just like the fact that it's you can inhabit a space physically. So, for example, I'm not a gamer when it comes to kind of computer games. I've never had a console, but when it comes to VR, I like the fact that I'm not just sitting down, that I'm moving in the space, that when I throw something, I'm actually moving my arm. When I'm kind of playing tennis, I'm actually swinging to hit the ball. So I like the fact that it's kind of full body movement. For me, that makes such a difference. It doesn't feel lazy. You can never say that someone who's in VR is lazy because they're moving constantly.
It's like you're moving in VR how you would in real life. How you navigate VR is how you navigate real life. There might be some tricks to get from A to B. They might give you teleportation abilities and all that, but you're still having to look around and move around. And definitely that. It's such a great fitness tool. That's another great avenue use case. I use it for fitness now. There's a calorie tracker when I'm playing my favorite games. It's telling me how much calories I'm losing. And so that's what brings me into VR every day now. I'm playing Beat Saber or something, or social Beat Saber. I get to play with other strangers. And so have that competitive vibe in real time to my favorite songs. And at the same time, it's whatever you pay for your headset and that flat fee of the game. And that's it. I have my gym at home, especially during COVID. It's been everything.
Amazing stuff. So
what do you see yourself doing next? Is there a certain project that you're interested in taking, or an area that you want to kind of venture into?
Yeah, I definitely want to be here for as long as possible. I love what I'm doing. I feel joy in it. So I don't feel a sense of I'm not spending much energy on what to do next. However, the things that do float in my head in general, maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the line, is definitely investment. How do I invest? Having been through this experience and as I found as a woman of color, and I know my idea is amazing because now there's 20 other startups doing my idea. I was the first person to come up with it. And I see 20 other startups starting to do this idea. And bias training with VR and applying it to workplaces. And I was I was just ahead of my time. I wasn't crazy, sometimes when you're looking for investment and you're not getting the yeses, I think 0.02% of Black women last year got investment. It's really a sad number. 2% of women get investment, period. So you're kind of just on your own in that field. And there's people coming up that's starting to change. You're seeing the Arlen Hamiltons come up, or the Alexis Ohanans, starting to these are people with money starting to make a bigger difference in investing in underrepresented founders. I want to be part of that. And again, it's I feel my mission has evolved to not only empower communities to leverage, resources to better their lives. I want to empower creators, creator communities, and that are underrepresented. So if investment is one direction. The second is creating creator lab spaces for minorities, for Black people, for underrepresented founders or startups to just be able to learn and create. I want to recreate what I had in grad school, which was like a room filled with technology and all the time in the world to just build, and held accountable by leaders who are pushing us to be creative in our solutions, and not really challenged to having a safe place to fail. And I want to be able to build that for underrepresented people in America and in different parts of the world, and then be able to invest in them, when they come out. And so something along those two lines, Creators Lab for like women of color or something, and then or like an Oculus Launchpad, like that was amazing. Like, it's just diversity in general, because I benefited. A lot of these programs, they're like Black females only, Black women only, or Black male, I find that part of what makes a successful industry is having access to white privilege in a way that being part of Oculus Launchpad, because it focused on diversity in general. And obviously white people, if you're a woman, white woman or whatever, or a gay white guy, you might have access to resources that I might not have. But if we build a connection through Oculus Launchpad, I found that my networking had, and where I was taking, it was an Asian woman that said, "Hey, Clorama, you would be great for Facebook RPM," because she was part of the Oculus Launchpad program. So, and Silicon Valley is 40% Asian, 40% white. So being in that diverse community gave me access to opportunities that I probably wouldn't have when you're only focusing on a marginalized community that doesn't have this type of power or opportunities to be able to share with each other. So I think mixing that up is something that I want to leverage. It was very powerful for my career growth, and seeing how I can do that is one avenue.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Totally going to support you in each one of those.
Excited.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Clorama, just thank you so much. I think what I really hope the listeners take away is that it really is a journey. I mean, all the different jobs and kind of careers that you've had, and now you're at a point where you say that you love your job. Like, that's kind of what we're all aiming for.
Yeah, I didn't think that was possible, just FYI. I never thought I could love my job. I always thought it could only get as good as a C+, and I just got to make it work. But that is not the case at all. But yeah, go ahead.
No, that's exactly it. And I think, for anyone listening who's like a bit maybe discouraged and is kind of earlier on in their journey, just hold on and keep searching. And I think what they can take from your example is open yourself to opportunities, even when they don't look kind of very beneficial on face value. Because what I kept hearing you say was, I did this thing, I wasn't too sure about it, but it opened the door to this other thing. Yeah. Now, if you hadn't done that first thing, you would never open the door. You might have thought, I'm what's the word? I got lucky to not do that, but you don't know what was on the other side of that. So I think what people can take from you is just open yourself to opportunities, try. I think I even wrote it down that you said, well, I just tried. I was willing to try. And I think being willing to try things can really open up opportunities for you.
No, I definitely echo that. Like, I don't know, I think what's in my mind is kind of imagining your housemates walking into the room and looking at you as if you're crazy. And I think that's the thing. People are going to look at you crazy when you're making decisions and taking opportunities that seem kind of random or weird or strange. But I think you just, as you did, like, open yourself up to those opportunities and see where it leads you, because you did it out of love and passion. And I think a lot of the time, those are the things that we have to kind of grab onto, the things that we do from a place of passion and love. So completely.
Focus on finding excitement in the trying, and then like, I got to try this versus like I get to taste, and then think of it as like, I'm tasting this ice cream flavor, I'm tasting this ice cream flavor, I'm tasting this ice cream flavor. I think what a lot of people do is like, oh, if I do that, I'm going to fail, and they focus on like they've already imagined or predicted failure, and that's what they focused on, and all of a sudden they're no longer interested in trying. Like, shift your focus on, if that idea of something like that excites you, don't think about the end game. Think about like, well, the first, like, just trying and seeing where that, and having fun in that trying. And in fact, I expect failure. I expected failure. I didn't expect to be successful in half those things, And that's what empowered me to just try it, just because I was excited for the fun of it. So I think that's definitely what you guys are hitting on is on point. Like, try it and like, don't, if you're focusing on failure, then, and that's use that as a decision to not do something, then maybe that's not, it's just not the right attitude to have when you're opening yourself up to, focus on the fun and the experience of doing something and be okay with failure. I guess that's what I want to say. Like, be totally fine with failure. It doesn't matter, and feel and still secure in yourself and your failure. Like, at least if I fail, at least you try, because that's what most people don't do. That's what 95% of people don't do. 95% of people don't even try, and you can give yourself credit for at least trying, and that's where the success is.
Yeah, completely. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Clorama, and amazing speaking to you. I'd love you to just kind of just give you the floor to share where people can find you online, if there's kind of some good places, and anything you want them to know about that you're working on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I think I live on Twitter now. Twitter.com/creativeclo. Just exactly how it's spelled, CLO, Creative Clue. I think I live there the most. And I do have a website. It's like www.creativeclo.com, but I have not updated it in years. So, but yeah, you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn, Clorama Dorvilias. And yeah.
Exciting. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Oh my gosh, it was so fun. I appreciate being on here. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode of A Seat at the Tech Table. You can connect with us on our social media platforms. Just search @SistersInTech on Twitter and Instagram, and check out our website www.sistersin.tech to see what we've got going on. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll bring you the next episode soon.